bom dia. Agora aqui no Estúdio Nave vamos prosseguir com os trabalhos. Seja bem-vindo, estou agora a dar-lhe as boas-vindas neste terceiro e último dia de trabalho de conferências, porque depois temos a parte de lazer. E convido mais uma vez a vir até aqui, a Ponte Sor, para assistir aos espetáculos aéreos e amanhã à noite também vai poder assistir a uma coisa bem diferente, uma passagem de modelos. Vou estar a apresentar com o João Maia de Abreu uma passagem de modelos, mas de companhias aéreas. Vão ser 10 companhias nacionais e internacionais que vão mostrar a sua moda ao longo dos vários anos de atividade. Vai ser muito interessante. Mas interessante é com certeza o que vai acontecer e o que já está a acontecer nesta sexta-feira, neste terceiro dia de Portugal Air Summit. Temos falado ao longo destes dias do impacto da pandemia, do impacto da guerra. Olhando para a pandemia propriamente dita, obrigou-nos a repensar a nossa vida e obrigou-nos também a repensar o modo como trabalhamos, o modo como fazemos negócio. E por isso mesmo vai ser esse o moto da intervenção neste Estúdio Nave, com Gavin, Eccles, Managing Partner da JA Consulting and Advisory, que vai falar-nos exatamente da transformação das empresas, dos desafios e oportunidades para aeroportos e destinos. Chamo então Gavin Eccles. Good morning and welcome. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning to those who are, or good afternoon to those also online. Thank you very much to the Portugal Air Summit for this opportunity. So I have 15 minutes to kind of give a little bit of an overview of what's happening in the industry of aviation and impacts that might have for airports and destinations. Some people always ask, where were you on the day that JFK was shot? And then we had a second major change. Where were you on September the 11th? And then there's another story now. Where were you in March 2020? Now, for those of us that worked in aviation in 2020, this was obviously something that we'd never experienced. And the realities that we're seeing was that we didn't know what to do. The industry was, we have an expression, deers in the headlights. We froze. The industry froze. We ended up not realizing where may we go, and all of the doom and gloom that we lost 80% of the market destinations. People didn't know how aviation was coming back. Interestingly, what we saw in 2020 was the fastest growing airport in the world was not Dubai or London or Singapore. It was a little airport in Montana. And this, why do I say this? Why is it important that Montana in the US was the fastest growing airport in the world? Was because all of a sudden airlines didn't know where to fly. And this was in the middle of big sky country where the opportunities for people to have space and not be on top of each other, why all of a sudden an airport in the middle of nowhere became very important. And airlines started to look at this and think, the way that we plan and the way that we work, we really need to change that model. And actually, looking ahead, things are very good. We have to now think about what next. So if we look here on the slide, you can see that the predictions are that by 2023, so next summer, we probably will be back to the same levels of capacity that we were seeing in 2019. The only slight white elephant here in the room is what about China? Because as we all know, at the end of 2019, China was about 800 million outbound travelers. And that 800 million outbound travelers has totally frozen for the last 2 years. So in looking at these figures from IATA, they're predicting that come 27 through to 30, China will be back and Asia Pacific will be another huge opportunity. Interestingly is that the North Americas and Europe, particularly where we are at the moment, we're kind of a little bit saturated. Why? Our infrastructure is tight. Airports are congested, airspace is congested, so that puts a little bit of a worry about where we see the vision of opening up development within parts of the world context. But picking up on that, other research is showing that the order books of aviation is also very strong. So the industry is not stopping. As I used in my analogy at the start, there was a worry that would the industry come back. The industry is bouncing back faster than we anticipated. We only have to look what happened here in Europe in the summer of 22. The problems in London, the problems in Amsterdam, where there was so much travel so quickly that the infrastructure could not support the amount of travel. So we are a resilient industry. We bounced back from September the 11th, and we're bouncing back quicker than we ever thought we would from the pandemic. So what opportunities does that bring to the industry around aviation? And that's where I want to pick up a little bit. So the two most important developments here would be for what airports can get from this, and how the destinations, tourism, live also with the vision of this growth. The little bit that hasn't yet come back is the area around corporate travel. There are some discussions ongoing. Will business travel come back as it was in 2019? And we're not seeing yet the corporate travel return as quickly as the leisure travel. So that has a very important analogy then for tourism. Because at the moment, what we're seeing is a booming industry in leisure. People wanted to travel this summer to get out of the 2 years of being locked down. So tourism has been the driver of aviation. Cargo was the driver of aviation during the pandemic, and leisure has been the driver of aviation as we come through this first phase of the recovery. The business travel is not yet there, and that has some major impacts on some of the major airports in the world, because a lot of their travel was related with developing the corporate routes. Next is to look at the low-cost strategy. Now, if we think about where the low costs are going, the interesting analogies here is that the market has space to grow. If I look at North America, around a third of the travel in North America is in with the low-cost airlines. But when we go back to my earlier slide, the infrastructure in the US is not allowing for much more growth. The airports are congested, the skies are congested. So the low-cost penetration, people like Southwest, Frontier, Allegiant, these are airlines that have been growing in the US, they have limits because they're fighting very hard with United, American, and Delta that have got the tradition of owning the slots in the airports. So even though when we think about America and the development of US aviation, when you come to the low-cost strategy, they're not as developed as maybe they would like, because that's also putting emphasis. Looking where we have opportunities would be in Latin America and Africa. Latin America is in a buoyant stage at the moment with low-cost development. Two major groups that are developing this. One is Indigo Partners, which is the owner of Wizz Air, Frontier, and they have an airline in Latin America called JetSmart. JetSmart is doing a lot of new work in Chile and really starting to penetrate the Latin space with the low-cost strategy. And the same with the Islandia Group, that is the owner of Viva, which is in Mexico and Colombia. And these are powerful aviation companies really pushing strategies of low-cost development and going into those continents where you haven't had much open skies policy to allow for that development. Africa is crying out for development. They have a project in Africa called SAFA, which is to try and have a single African sky, to try and break up the government monopolies on airspace, and that would really allow further development of the low-cost strategy in Africa. Coming a little bit closer to the other side, you can see a major push in Asia, particularly India and Southeast Asia. People like AirAsia which is one of the largest groups within the Southeast Asian. You have Indigo in India, which is one of the fastest growing airlines today. And of course, coming again to China, look at the numbers of only 15% of Chinese airspace is in the hands of low cost. And China was the most, or the largest aviation market before the pandemic, but only 15% of its travel was in the hands of the low-cost strategy. So if you think about where we in Europe have been with Ryanair, EasyJet, and Wizz, and how they've developed the European picture, just how that might be replicated in other countries and continents as we move to this next stage of aviation transformation. We also have new hardware coming. So during the pandemic, when airlines were worried about where may they be going, the manufacturers, Airbus, Boeing, as the two major providers here, they were heavily investing in technologies for the next wave of aviation. And what we're starting to look at is how to be able to fly further. It's all about making the economics of airlines and trying to reduce the numbers of seats that we sell. It's a bit strange to think like this because when we had the project of the A380, it was about build them big and fill the aircraft. The economics doesn't think that anymore. What we're now starting to look at is smaller aircraft that can fly further. So we now have Airbus working up what they call the 321 XLR, which will take airlines to 9 to 10 hours. So for instance, we can start looking at Chicago to Lisbon. We have Chicago to Lisbon today with an A330. That's with 300 seats. But I could now look at Chicago to Lisbon with 160 seats. The economics of that, if the demand is there, we can push up the price. And this is the strategies that airlines are now starting to look for. How do we go further with less? But when you have less and you have demand, the economics of airlines can allow you to push up what we call the yield, how much we get per seat. And of course, the fuel efficiencies of these new aircraft allow you to save major reductions in your costs. And as fuel can be as high as 40% of an airline's operating costs, any reduction in that fuel cost is a way that we can try and add value to the total rentability of the route. So this is a game changer for a lot of destinations because it allows secondary destinations to look at first city source markets. So you could start to see this project working very strongly, let's say in Southern Europe, be it that we could look at opening up routes from the United States to the Algarve as an example. To bring a plane with 300 people or bring a plane with 160 people, there's a big difference in the economics. So you can start to look at how this project will allow destinations to think a little bit differently. But the question that's come from the pandemic, and the one thing that we've really tried to understand, is we needed to change. Sometimes you need, the pandemic was more than what we could call a blip. It was a big blip, and we lost a lot of money. But what the pandemic has taught the industry of aviation is that we need to be more nimble. We can't think about planning 9 months to 1 year ahead. If we look at what happened in 21 and now running into 22, a lot of the airlines are basing their decisions about where they fly using Google search. Where is the consumers? What are the consumers looking for? Pre-pandemic, airlines were buying databases on historical information, how many people were flying. And now they want to know what people are looking for. So the industry of aviation is changing dramatically because the consumer is driving the airline. So what you're now starting to look at is we can't plan for 1 year ahead because we don't know what might happen in a year. What great opportunities are there now to do more flights, let's say, for Christmas? And that had not been in the past. Airlines were very traditional. The logistics of running an airline was very traditional. And this is now changing. The way airlines are planning, but does that work with the airports? What about slots and how you manage your relationship with an airline? Because the relationship should be, we need to work closer together. We need to think about opportunities. And rather than flying routes that are losing money, let's start looking at route opportunities that can be very easy. Why I showed that picture of Montana. That airport had no traffic, maybe 2 flights a day. And during the pandemic, they were getting to 30 to 40 flights a day because all of a sudden it was trendy to go to destinations where nobody were going. Now that might be the trend now in summer. So how do we start building for that and not just planning with such long range? And that has to be an opportunity. The question for an airport is, are you ready for airlines that might come to you with requests for development within 6 weeks? And what about destinations? Destinations spend a lot of money creating communication campaigns, brand awareness. How easy is it for a destination to turn on their market in 6 weeks? If the trends of Google are showing that there's a huge opportunity in market X, can a destination pick up its marketing and move that marketing very quickly to try to pick up on the source that's coming from Google? So this using forward data and not historical data is a major change in the way airlines are thinking about their route development. And that has a major impact on how airports and destinations can work to benefit from the pandemic. So in all, the pandemic was a problem. We lost 80% of our business. 2023, we probably will be back, depending upon China, very close to where we were. That's a remarkable recovery. The learnings from this are we've got to think smarter, we have to plan shorter, we have to work better with our partners, and we need to look at these new opportunities. We need to be picking up on the trends. We need to be thinking about what might happen 6 months. No, what might happen 2 months from now, and how we can develop that. And the way that we sell is changing. You know, the old days of having to have 1 or 2 channels. No, the future for aviation is we should be selling tickets in supermarkets through blockchain. How can we not sell an airline ticket on an ATM machine of a bank? We have that with the trains. I can't buy an aircraft ticket. So if the industry's changing and things are quicker, airlines have to react. And it's not just about having the routes ready, you need the infrastructure behind that. Can people buy tickets quickly? The demand is there, the supply needs to come with it. So my closing remarks is that, look, the pandemic changed aviation. There was a real worry that airlines might not come back. Actually, what we're seeing is capacity back quicker than any research that was being done during the pandemic. And the problems we faced in the summer was a reflection of that we just didn't realize how much demand was looking to travel. We've learned from that. The airports have started to develop their infrastructure. We're now ready for summer 23, and we need to start thinking about what's next. Hardware is changing. New aircraft are coming to the market. Those aircraft allow new destinations to develop, and airports need to work smarter with airlines to have much shorter lead times in how we work together. So thank you very much. I hope everybody has a very good day, and it was a pleasure to be here today at the Air Summit. Thank you.